Hello, Miami. This is 305 Sports Now, your home podcast and channel for all things Miami sports related. I am Will, and joining us today is former two-time national champion for your Miami Hurricanes and the current head coach at Holy Trinity Episcopal Academy High School located in Melbourne, Florida. None other than Cane legend, Coach Hurlie Brown. Coach, how's it going?
Man, it's going great. Well, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing just fine, man. Blessed and happy to be here. Thank you so much for joining us here at 305 Sports Now. We look forward to your stories. And like I mentioned earlier before we started the show, it's your life as a Miami Hurricane and your life after as a mentor of young men. But the first thing I want to go with is how did you decide on being a Miami Hurricane when you're approached with the opportunity?
Well, my best friend was like a brother to me. Bubba McDowell was all there, and him and both Eric Ham are two Merritt Island Mustang guys, and so I was coming down quite often with Bubba's dad and his family to watch his games, being around the players. Bubba and Michael Irvin had a really good relationship, so I was able to be around, Mike in his sophomore, junior seasons, stuff like that, and watch those guys. But one of the biggest deciding factors was when they went to Tampa in 1986. Bethune-Cookman University and Florida A&M University used to have their classic in Tampa. Mm-hmm. So, and this was right before Miami played for the national championship game, for the national championship versus Penn State in 1986. Jerome Brown, Winston Moss, Daryl Fullington, Tolbert Bain, Benny Blaze, Brian Blaze, Brett Perriman. All of these guys had gotten together. They had a bye week when Bethune-Cookman was playing Florida A&M for the Florida Classic in Tampa. So Bubba was able to come home and take me to the game. So I get a chance to go over to the game and be around those guys, and it was one of the most amazing events. One of the biggest times of my life, being around a football game, especially being around all of these. At that time, they were just starting to begin their celebrity status. You get a chance to watch Jerome Brown interact with the people and Winston Moss and, hanging out with those guys, and Brett Perriman, Daryl Fullington, and Tolbert Bain. And it was just, for a high school senior, it was one of the greatest things I'd ever been around. Just to watch how those guys, the camaraderie, the brotherhood, the fellowship. Bobby Harden was there, Kenny Berry. There was probably 20 guys, and they were thick as thieves. They just spent a lot of time together. But I got a chance as a, like I said, a 17, 18-year-old kid, got a chance to witness, how close they really were. And that sold me. That was like, okay. And to be honest with you, at that particular time, I had no idea that Miami I didn't even have a shot of going to the University of Miami. And I hadn't even gone through my senior season, just starting to get recruited and stuff like that. So, but being able to see those guys and watch how they interacted with each other and stuff like that, man, it was an awesome feeling.
Yeah, especially that team in particular during that period, I would say from the 80s and 90s, it's a brotherhood. Those guys still keep in touch. They pass by the university. It's like Michael Irvin never left. When you really look at Mike's always doing things for the university. So I'm glad you had the opportunity, to become a Cane as well. And you played on some very, very good teams. You won a national championship in 1989 and 1991 as a player. But I wanted to ask you, Leon seriously tells amazing stories about this. During that time period, you had some really nasty rivalries with Notre Dame and Florida State. It was basically national championship bust in between those couple schools. Leon, obviously the documentary done by Billy Corbin, the U, and Leon had a lot of stories as well about the whole Catholics versus convicts thing. Being a player that experienced it, and so on. What was it like being, a part of that rivalry? Leon had a lot of things to say. He called them unchristian and a little short of calling demonic. I will say that Coach seriously called him. What does Coach Hurlie Brown think about Notre Dame and his time, as a part of that rivalry?
It was a great rivalry. It was a great rivalry. I don't get into the name call and all that. I all my kids like Notre Dame, like Notre Dame. Yeah. Hey, I got to be a little bit more politically correct than Leon. Leon personality, and I'm still in a position to where, hey, look, I may need Notre Dame one day.
Absolutely, I get it.
It was a great rivalry. It was a man. I learned so much from those games. One of the biggest coaching points that I've learned was from that game when Cleveland Gary went with the phantom call, the phantom fumble.
Yeah, I remember.
Right. Cleveland Gary was, and I'll never forget it. I can remember like it was yesterday. Cleveland Gary came into the locker room and he was bawling. I mean, he was crying his eyes out, and he just felt like he had let the team down. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, that's messed up. I'm a freshman, so it's like, whatever. Jimmy Johnson kneels down in front of Cleveland Gary, gets in between his legs and kneels down and puts both hands on both of his knees and told him to get his head up. That one play did not win or did not lose this football game. You played an amazing game, and you have a lot to be proud of. And I'm sitting there and I'm watching this like, wow. And I've carried that with me for the last 30 years, and it's gotten me through a lot of tough situations with as a coach with my kids. As a matter of fact, there was a situation down when I was coaching at Dillard High School back in 1998. Our kicker kicked the ball to one of the greatest kick returners in the game. He returned it for a touchdown right before half. And I'm sitting there, and our head coach at that particular time was, oh, man, you weren't supposed to kick the ball to him. I'm the special teams coordinator. And I'm like, hey, look, you made a mistake. Don't worry about that. And I went back to that day that Jimmy Johnson had that conversation with Cleveland Gary and learned how to, hey, look, things happen. That one play is not going to win or lose a football game for us. So I'm having this conversation with this kid, and I told him, you're going to come back and win this game for us. And I'll be darned, at the end of the game, we needed a field goal. Kid had never really kicked a field goal before in the whole season. And all of a sudden, we're in the doggone playoffs, and we need him to kick a field goal at the end of the game. And the kid goes out there and he kicks the field goal, and we win the game. Had it not been for that conversation that I learned from Jimmy Johnson, I don't think I would have had the ability or even the knowledge to go to this kid after he had made one of the biggest mistakes of the game and calm him down and let him know how important he was to that football game. And it still happens, and those are some of the things that, you take from those games, and you put them in the back of your mind, and you continue to learn from them, and you build on it. So it was a great rivalry. A friend, one of my real good friends, Derek Brown, played for Notre Dame. And so, we would go back and forth. But, you got a chance to see people when you start talking about, Catholics versus convicts. You got a chance to just see how people can be, how cruel they can be. But for us, it just put fuel on the fire. I don't hold no ill will towards them, nothing like that. I mean, come on, man, it's just a football game. Mm-hmm. And that floats your boat, that's what allows you to sleep at night. You do what you got to do. But we're coming out here and we're going to do everything we can to win this football game. So whatever you do, whatever T-shirt you got or whatever signs you got, it really doesn't matter. We got tunnel vision, and back then we used to use the phrase "eye of the tiger." So it's, hey, look, the eye of the tiger. We're ready to, you do whatever. Yeah, that's okay. You're gonna piss us off. You're gonna make us mad, and we'll beat you worse than what we're gonna beat you. But it was all in fun. It was like I said, it was a great time of my life at that particular time, watching that, seeing it, how it unfolded. But we had a job to do, and we went out and tried to do our job to the best of our ability.
We're gonna go back to the Jimmy Johnson story, because that's a very fascinating story you told when we talk about your time as a coach. But as far as the whole Notre Dame Florida State thing, in 1990 you come back and you beat 1989, forgive me. You come back and you beat Notre Dame, right? The capacity crowd at the Orange Bowl was massive. The energy was there. you got them, and that pretty much propelled you into the national championship game that year in which you ended up winning the national championship as a team. That being your sophomore year, how did you feel, as a young kid, wearing that uniform, that basically your dream just came true. You became a Miami Hurricane, and you're a national champion. What was going through your mind when you beat Notre Dame and then you won the championship that year?
It was surreal. It was magical. Um, in that game, that season. So you go from Jimmy Johnson to Dennis Erickson, and we didn't know who Dennis was or whatever, but we all felt a sense of responsibility to each other. So we had a team meeting, and the leaders, and the one thing that was so amazing about the University of Miami at that particular time were our leaders, the older guys. Those guys that taught us how to be Miami Hurricanes. Those guys, we spent a lot of time with Jerome Browns, the Alonzo Highsmiths, the Melvin Brattons. Those guys would always come back. And so they taught you how to be a Miami Hurricane. They taught you the work ethic. They taught you how to carry yourself. But they even taught you where to go get haircuts and stuff. And so they were the big brothers of the program. And so when we were getting ready before we played that game, there was a situation where things weren't going so well, and we were kind of out of it. And so the older guys, the Russell Marylands, guys like that, they corralled the team. They're like, "Hey, look, wait a minute, Dale Dawkins, guys, we're not performing the way that we know how to perform. This is not what we were taught. This is not how we were taught to play and execute. We don't care." And the consensus of that meeting was, we don't care what they do with the offense. We don't care if they change the defense. We don't care, because this team, as it sits in this room right now today, will never be the same. But we got to make a promise to each other that we're going to go out and we're going to play our butts off for each other, and we're going to win for us. We're not worried about everybody else. The fans are great. We love our fans the whole 9 yards, but we're not sitting here saying, "Hey, look, if you don't show up at the Orange Bowl, we're not going to go out and perform." We performed for that 100 and what it was, about 115, 120 guys in the locker room, because we loved each other. Russell Maryland stood up and he made the statement, "I don't care if it's 3rd and 20 and they call quarterback sneak. Everybody in this room has got to make a promise to each other that you're going to do everything within your power to get your job done and execute that play, and we're going to go get that first down." Playing against Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, we're backed up. It's 3rd and 31. We're backed up inside the 1 yard line. 37 yards later, we hold the ball for, I think, a 16-play drive. We held the ball for 12 minutes out of the 15 minutes in that one quarter. We end up winning the game, and that's what propelled us into the national championship. So had we not had the fortitude of those older guys, I don't think we make that. I don't think we have I don't think that we are confident enough to go out and make that play. Randall Hill, and to be perfectly honest with you, if Randall keeps his feet, if he doesn't lay out for the ball, that's a 99-yard touchdown. But it was good enough to get us the first down, and we held the ball for 4/5 of that quarter. Notre Dame's offense couldn't get on the field. They got on the field once, and I think it was 3 and out. Then they got on the field again, and then we got them off the field, and we held the ball, winning the game. But those are the things that those guys and guys, the coaches had taught us before, we had even gotten to that point. So when you go back and you look at those types of situations, we were taught how to be Miami Hurricanes by our brothers, Jim and his staff. So it wouldn't have mattered, what happened. When Dennis was a great coach, an offensive genius. He revolutionized college football. Mm-hmm. But from what we learned from Jimmy and his guys, and not just Jimmy, but the older guys, like I said, Jerome, Winston, guys like that, Dan Cilio, Vinny Testaverde, those guys would always come back. And again, they forced you to be great. Either you're going to be great or you're going to be gone.
That's amazing. And like I said, you guys are like a brotherhood, as far as like a Canes family goes. And and again, like Leon would tell stories and stuff like that about, getting phone calls after losing games, from the guys. Did you ever get those phone calls as well as a player from the
We,
old Canes
I
when you lost the game?
I don't know why Leon got them, but I didn't. We didn't. They only lost 5 games in 6 years. 2 undefeated seasons. 4 national champions. Played for 4 national championships. Was a part of 4 national championships. So we didn't get a lot of phone calls.
Oh, okay. That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that because they're pretty intense from what I heard. The ones who did get phone calls, it was pretty intense from what I heard. The 91 season was one of my favorite seasons. I was 11 years old. I've been a Canes fan since I was 7 because that's when I started to remember football. I was 11 years old. I'll never forget that 91 season. Number 1 Florida State versus number 2 Miami. You guys go to Doak Campbell Stadium. For some reason, you weren't the number 1 ranked team in the country, even though you had beaten a top 5 team in Penn State before. That atmosphere at Doak Campbell Stadium, wide right. How nerve-wracking was it for you? Once Florida State, had an opportunity to kick that field goal.
It was crazy. I mean, we're sitting back and we're like, man, you're constantly just trying to move and you're constantly trying to just go out and do your job, but you're sitting back and that was the longest play of my whole life. One of actually the longest. To sit back and watch, like, dude, did he make it? And you don't know. So Bobby Bowden runs out, then he goes back. So we really didn't know until the referees, gave the signal that it was no good. And it was crazy. I can't even put it in words how crazy that was. But it was an awesome feeling. It just to quiet that whole stadium down because, man, it's tough to play in Doak Campbell Stadium. You're talking about one of the greatest pregame traditions in college football.
Yeah.
And you play them. Don't play them at night. Now, hey, this is advice to all the athletic directors across the country: do not schedule Florida State at 8, 9 o'clock at night. Don't do it. If you're gonna play them at 2 and 3 o'clock. That way, the fans haven't had the chance to get rowdy and all. They don't have. But it's a great stadium to play in. But to silence those guys up, man, that was unbelievable. But again, it's all the work that we had put in. It was nothing. We were kind of a little frustrated at times because we felt that we had the better team going in. We weren't ranked as high as we thought we should have been. And but you had some guys that stepped up and made some great plays. Steve McGuire had a great game.
Oh yeah, I remember. He ran all over them.
Yeah, Steve McGuire had an amazing game. He was killing. I think it was Kirk Carruthers. He was killing them.
Yeah.
And Horace Copeland caught that the what was it, the 3rd and 6, or 4th and 6.
It was like 4th and 6 or 4th and 10. I remember he got flipped on his head.
Oh yeah, you know what I mean. So
yeah, I remember.
Coleman Bell caught the I guess I'm not going to say the game-winning, catch, but it was a big-time catch, and it allowed us to keep the drive going, which allowed us to score, and that was what gave us the win. It gave us the victory. So we had a lot of guys that stepped up in that game that they don't talk about, but we know the guys that were there. We know who played hard and who stepped up and made big plays. So it was a great game. It was an amazing game.
Yeah, the interesting part about that, Coach Brown, is that the quarterback for Florida State was a kid named Casey Weldon.
Oh yeah.
And Casey, to me, is one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the history of Florida State. And I think the reason why is because he didn't win a national championship, but they used to compare him to Joe Montana because he looked like him and he had the same stance as a pocket passer. So it must have not been easy, planning for a guy like that, in particular, because he's not your prototypical college kid that looks a receiver down. He would actually scour the field and then pass the receiver he knew was going to be open. So when taking an individual like that, in particular, in that particular game, what was the game planning like? How many hours of film did you guys watch on Casey, or anybody? For example, I'm focusing on Casey. We talk about Florida State, on someone like Casey, like strengths, weaknesses, etc. Like what type of planning did it take to make sure he didn't get the better of you guys in that game?
Well, Florida State week was a little bit different from the rest of the games.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's acknowledge that first. And but again, that's what we were taught. So at Miami, and it still holds true today. Florida State week, there's no class. Now, I don't know if they can get away with it now, but back then, hey, the coaches, everybody knew and understood. Around that campus, there's not a whole lot of classes going on. Now, if you have an exam, you go get your exam taken care of. But if you don't have exams, you owe everybody the responsibility of getting over here and watching as much film as you can. And I'm telling you, we're watching film every day. And sometimes 2 and 3 hours before you can get out to practice, 2 and 3 hours when you get back, from having dinner that night. We watched film all week long. You had, and they had a great team. They had a really good football team. So you had Casey Weldon. You had, I want to say Edgar Bennett was still there. You had the Fab Three, the Fab Four. You had Lawrence Dawsey. What was Dexter Carter? Ronald Lewis. Man, they had a great football team. But so did we. And we weren't going to be denied. We felt that we outworked everybody. We were smarter. We were more disciplined. And we were going to outplay you. It was just that simple. You can play with us for 3 quarters, but you ain't going to play with us for 48 minutes. Florida State, because of the nature of both schools, a bunch of us played with those guys throughout high school. We grew up around those guys. So we were the same types of players, same mentality. We were dogs. And it was just a matter of who was willing to go for 60 minutes. And at the end of the game, who was going to be still standing. And that's what those games have always been with us. That 1989 game, worst whooping I've ever had in my life, ever in football. And I never forget, Edgar Bennett drug Charles Farms. Charles Farms, they made a nice tackle and stuff. Edgar Bennett pulled him for a couple of yards. Mm-hmm. And Edgar Bennett got up. Charles was still on the ground, and I had just gotten to the play. And Edgar Bennett jumped up. He put his hands on his hips like he was a woman and stood over Charles like this. You just got drugged. I said, God dang. And he jogged and turned around and ran back to the huddle. And I'm sitting there, man, they're beating us and they're talking junk to us the whole time. And we couldn't come back. And, that was Gino Toretta's first start because of Craig Erickson had broke his knuckle. And it was just crazy. But to come back and beat those guys in Doak Campbell Stadium in 1991, that was the reckoning that we were looking for.
Well, you got the better end of that season. You ended up winning the national championship. So, I mean, I think that's so you guys, so they may have gotten drugged, but he's the one to hold up the ring. So in the end, that's all that matters.
They lost to Brett Favre at Southern Miss.
Yeah.
So, Brett Favre did us a favor. Been a Brett Favre. Yeah. With the exception of this welfare deal, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, no. It's a whole other scenario.
Oh no.
Oh, totally. All right. So, going back to Jimmy Johnson with Cleveland Gary, you become a GA at UM in 1992. You become a graduate assistant. Am I correct? That's what I saw. Yep. Yeah, you become a GA in 1992. And so obviously you're looking into coaching. How much did Jimmy Johnson and that in particular scene with Cleveland Gary, and also obviously, being under Dennis Erickson, like you said, was an innovator, at least on the offensive side of the ball. How did it influence your coaching style, and how did it make you want to get into coaching?
Oh, well, I mean, just watching those guys, and Sonny Lubick had played a very integral part in me being a coach. I had just gotten cut from the Washington Redskins. I come home, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And so I would go back to the University of Miami and work out with those guys. And Coach Lubick saw me down in the weight room. So he stopped me and was like, hey, look, why don't you come over and help us out? And I thought about it at first, but to be honest with you, the only reason that I played or was able to play at the University of Miami because I wasn't big, I wasn't fast, I wasn't strong. I wasn't a Darrell Williams. And so I had to, I used my mind. All right, it was chess for me. So it was more of me being in the right position, being able to understand the game. I had a high football IQ. So it was almost like I was a coach on the field at the time that I was playing. So it was almost inevitable. It was something that I always felt that I was gonna do. It was just a matter. I didn't think I was gonna have to do it at that at that time in my career. I thought I was going to be able to go off and play in the league for a little while, and then once I got done, I'd always wanted to become a coach. But watching those guys, watching how they moved, watching how they studied, watching the impact and understanding the impact that they had on young men's lives, I wanted that. And well, I'll be honest with you, I had more fun coaching and teaching young men. I'll never forget, C.J. Richardson was the guy that I got an opportunity to coach that year. Ryan McNeil, Dexter. We had a great secondary, and we had the best linebacking core, arguably one of the best linebacking cores in college football. Being able to be around those guys and help, just add a little something else to their games, and then be able to go out and watch them execute. I never forget Kevin Williams. The last time we played Notre Dame, I got a chance to go over there and see those guys after the game. And Rocket Ismail. Yeah. Rocket Ismail, at that particular time, was one of the greatest kick returners in the game. So, and because of Derek Brown's relationship, mine and Derek Brown's relationship, I was able to go to the hotel where they were staying and visit with those guys. So I'm always trying to pick guys' minds and see what's different. What is it how do they think different from me, or what can I take from their game and put it in mine to help me become a better player? So we went to the Rockets room, and I asked him, hey, look, man, what makes you so different? And he just told me, hey, look, Hurlie, when I get the ball, I know that hole is only going to open up for a short period of time. So I don't waste any time. I hit the hole right away. I mean, I'm gone. This is on kickoff return. So I get back, and I grabbed Kevin Williams, like, hey, Doug, because at first, when you go back and you watch Kevin when he first started returning kicks and punts, especially punts, Kevin would hold the ball and kind of wait, and then he might dance a little bit, and then he would go. But with Kevin's speed, I'm sitting there saying, hey, look, man, you very similar to this guy. It's not faster. So, Kevin, this is what the Rocket is saying. And I had surgery. Never forget, I had knee surgery, and we were playing, I want to say Pittsburgh. So I had knee surgery that Friday night. We're playing Saturday. I had a meniscal tear. So I'm out at the game. I'm on crutches. And right before halftime, I'm trying to walk in to beat the crowd so I don't get run over. So I'm walking, and they're getting ready to punt the ball. The opposing team is punting the ball to Miami, to us. And I'm walking. And all of a sudden, I turn around, I get to the end zone, and Kevin's standing, he's running right past me into the end zone. And I'm like, dang. So sure enough, I got a chance to talk to Kevin. And after watching the film that next week, he did exactly what I told him to do. And it's like, hey, look, when he caught it, he went. And when he went, there was no stopping him. So I'm sitting back and like, oh, man, I may have had something to do with him being able to have the success that he had. So I've really enjoyed that. And then when I get a chance to finally coach, I'm sitting there talking to guys, like I said, C.J. Richardson, Dexter Siegler, and Ryan McNeil, and coaching those guys up. And you go out, and all of a sudden, those guys do exactly what you taught them to do during the week on that Saturday. And I'm like, yes, there we go. So, I had a lot of fun with it that year. And then I went off and played Canadian ball for a while. And then when I got done playing Canadian ball, I jumped right back into it at Dillard High School. And, man, just to be able to, and I've always tried to act like those guys, to just, to be what they were with us and our football teams. And there was a bunch of them, like I said, Sonny Lubick, Ed Ogeron, there was just a whole bunch of them, Gary Stevens, Dave Campo, Butch Davis, Dave Wanstead, Hubbard Alexander. I mean, it was just, there's so, Don Solinger. Don Solinger basically saved my life. Okay. Don Solinger was the guy that recruited me, and I got myself into a situation, and he stood by me, both him and Jimmy Johnson and the University of Miami, that entire staff, that entire school. And he wasn't gonna neglect me. He believed in me. He trusted me. And so you take a guy like that and how much he cared about his players, and you just add that to your repertoire. So when you're out here and you're recruiting these kids, or you're talking to these kids, and your paths cross, I want to be to them what Don Solinger was to me. I didn't play running back for him or tight end for him, but the impact that he had on me in my life, just being the type of person that he was, made a tremendous difference, a great impact on my life.
Yeah, he was a fantastic coach. I mean, he was actually one of my favorite assistant coaches that you had. And his resume is, you can't argue with his resume. This is a guy that made, pretty much NFL superstars out of his running back core, with EJ, then Clinton Portis and James Jackson. So when I personally thought, he was used, my words, not yours, he was used as a scapegoat, when the quote unquote the U was in decline, after the 2002-2003 season. I thought Don was like not the guy that you let go, in terms of his recruiting, his knowledge of the game, the talent he produced, not just at the elite college football level, but also at the NFL level. There's that you cannot deny, what that man, did for the University of Miami. As far as also all the names that you mentioned, with Ed Ogeron, and also with Wanstead and Butch Davis, obviously Jimmy, Jimmy's a fan favorite down here, still this very day. So I'm glad that you had that opportunity to have someone like that, to guide you in a direction that made you who you are today, because you truly are a mentor. But before I go into your time at Florida International University, a good friend of mine and one of your former players wanted to give you a message. All right, so I'm a little surprised to you. All right, so this is a message from one of your former players, and I'm going to tell you who he is after I read the message to you. You ready, Coach?
Yep.
All right, it says, "Dear Coach Brown, thank you for being as hard as you were on me. I did not realize at the time what you were doing or what it was going to mean to me in the future. We bumped heads a few times, but now I know it was all for a greater cause. I can't thank you enough for standing up for me behind closed doors when they wanted to kick me out. Thank you for your patience with me. Thank you for being committed to your own degree and graduating while coaching me and encouraging me to get my degree. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, Coach. Best regards, KT Kevin Timothy."
Oh, and Kevin's an awesome dude, man. He's
yeah. We still speak every so often.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. I still talk to a bunch of those guys, Antoine Barnes, Alex Bostic.
Yeah,
that was an amazing group of young men.
Yeah. Well, as I told you before the broadcast, I was an announcer for FIU, and so I know a little bit about the program, especially when you were there. So if everybody doesn't know, everybody looks at FIU and they don't think that, FIU, but nonetheless, you turned out some pretty good players as a DB coach. You had Nick Turnbull, who's called the Truth, right? You had KT as well, who ran a 4.25, and then you had Greg Moss, who's now coaching over at Florida State and was actually special teams player of the week a couple times with the Sun Belt Conference. When you got the gig at FIU, how did you feel? And you had a lot of your former teammates working with you. Like, what was that like?
Well, it was awesome, man. I got a chance to work with Don Strock, Bruce Hardy, Tony Nathan. I mean, come on. You can't get much better than that. Those three guys. So it was a great opportunity. And then Leon Searcy came on board. Carmen Grosso was there when I got there. Carmen actually had a lot to do with me getting the job there, to be honest with you. Carmen, when he first got there, and I was the fourth guy to get hired. And that was, pretty much all of Carmen Grosso. He stood on the table with both hands and feet for me, and Don Strock, got a chance to meet with him, and it was an amazing opportunity. And I'm talking, man, we worked our butts off. I mean, we worked our butts off. I mean, we were in that trailer, and we recruited to compete with Miami. That was our deal. I mean, hey, look, we're not going to get the players Miami's going to get, but those kids that want to stay in Dade County and South Florida that can play. And I'm telling you, man, you go back and you look at the game where we had the big fight. Now, we were giving Miami everything they could handle. Go just back and look.
I was there.
When we're talking about kids that can play the game. They weren't 5-star, 4-star. They didn't have all the stars, but they could play the game. And that's what we built the program off of. So we had a guy named Tavares Kendrick. Man, you ever get a chance to go back and look at Tom Kendrick?
Okay.
Tom Kendrick was he should have been the next Dante Culpepper, is what he should have. He was the same size. He had an amazing arm, and it just didn't work out for him.
Okay.
But that we had Chandler Williams, you had Corey McKinney. I mean, dude, yes. We had Bowie, Antoine Barnes, we had Lionel Singleton. I mean, dude, we had some guys.
Yeah.
We had some real dudes.
Yeah. One of the guys I want to talk about a little bit, I forgot to bring this up before the show, but I want to get your perspective. One of the guys that I truly enjoyed watching play, but unfortunately he's no longer with us, was Lance Preston.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Lance was a very talented linebacker, very smart on the football field, knew when to hit the hole. For me as a broadcaster, it hurt because I used to talk to Lance, in the locker room and a couple times, when I had an opportunity to talk to him. As a coach, how do you feel when you lose a player, and how, that passes away, especially a young individual like Lance, who was in his early 20s? How does it make you, how as a coach, how do you feel, and how do you move forward as a team when you have a loss like that?
It hurt. It was just like losing a part of your family, whether it be a son or a brother. It hurt then, and it still hurts now, because he had such a promising future ahead of him. He was a great kid. Matter of fact, we offered Lance off of watching him on one kickoff. I mean, we watched one kickoff, he went down there and he demolished somebody. And we offered him off of that one play. And then he comes in, and his football IQ was out of the roof. His work ethic, just his personality, his ability to lead, everybody loved him. And he was one of our better players. And not just because of what he did on the football field, but just everything about him. You just fell in love with the kid. So when I got that phone call, man, oh my God, it hurt tremendously. And the only thing that you could do is reflect back on the memories, be like, hey, what would he want us to do? How would he want us to move on? He wouldn't want us to sit here and sulk. He wasn't that type of person. Hey, look, things happen. I expect you guys to go on and have productive lives. That's just the type of person that he was. And it still hurts to this day. Whenever I'm driving down the turnpike and I'm headed that way, I always look right up there at that 595 bridge and think about Lance. It was tough. It was tough.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it was tough for all of us, and KT, him and KT were very close.
Oh yeah,
so it hit Kevin really hard, when he passed. I mean, it was hard. It was very difficult for us. Go ahead.
We were all changed. It changed all of us.
Yeah,
it changed our perspective on life. It just changed everybody, and I don't think we've ever been the same since that. To be honest with you. We moved on, and in time, you never get over it.
Mm-hmm.
But you eventually just find a way to live with it.
I see.
But it changed everybody.
I see. You spent some time at FIU. Then moving forward a little bit, you spent some time at FIU. Coaching staff changes. In general, you end up at Louisiana Lafayette from 2007 to 2010. You've been in Florida for literally, a huge chunk of your life, if not all your life, in particular. What was it like to go from, then go to, Dillard, and then go to FIU, to now all of a sudden you're coaching, your former rival, the Raging Cajuns, over at Louisiana Lafayette?
It was awesome, man. It was, at first it was, you kind of struggled a little bit, but once you got involved with the people and the kids, and you start practicing, because it's kind of hard to go and to make that transition when nothing's going on. So at the time, right after signing day is when we moved. My wife and I moved to Lafayette, and so there wasn't a lot going on. But so you get up, you go to work every day. You might see some of the kids, you may not see them all. But once spring ball started, or once you started the off-season conditioning program, now it's football. Now, so it's tunnel vision again. It's not. You wake up, you go to work.